at 7:00, she's like, oh, I got to run a quick errand. I'll be back. And out the door she went at 7:00. And at 10:00, we got the knock on the door that every parent fears. You know, it's amazing how 3 people who are a part of the same family, love each other a lot, can grieve so differently.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. Free safe space for people to share and learn from others' experiences with mental health and addictions. I'm Todd Boehm, suicide attempt survivor and a recovering substance abuser. Welcome to another episode. This one is with a lovely young lady. Her name is Lisa Boehm. She is a podcaster, an author, and a grief mentor. Her podcast is called Rising Strong, Mental Health and Resilience, and she's also written a book, Journey to Healing, A Mother's Guide to Navigating Child Loss. A few years back, Lisa lost her teenage daughter in a car crash, and now she's helping other people with her mentoring and with her book and with her podcast. Next week, I'm going to re-release an episode. I'm going to take an older episode and release it with Chad Miro and Spence. It is a fascinating story of forgiveness. Chad's sister, her husband, and their 2 kids were killed in a drunk driving accident a few years back. Chad talks about that, processing all of that, and forgiveness. He is now best friends with the drunk driver's son. It's just an incredible, inspirational, and fantastic story. That'll be next week. And also, I am prepared now to announce when the consistently second episode a week will be out and who the co-host is, the whole title of it and everything. So hang on to your hats. Every Thursday, there's going to be a new episode released, and those episodes will be titled Mental Health Headline Hot Takes with Nick Thompson and Todd Boehm. That's right, if you remember Nick Thompson, he was on a few episodes back. He was on Love is Blind Season 2, and he has his own podcast, Eyes Wide Open, and we are collaborating together once a week to discuss, mental health headlines. Here, I'll play you the intro.
We're coming in hot to give you our hot takes on all the latest mental health news.
From headlines and memes to developments and breakthroughs.
We go into this show blind with the hopes of learning something new.
Before sharing some bunny hugs.
And leaving with our eyes wide open. I'm Nick.
And I'm Todd. And this is Mental Health Headline Hot Takes.
We're glad you're here.
So there you have it, starting Thursday, January 4th. Episodes of that will be coming out. It'll still be under Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. They'll just be titled Mental Health Headline Hot Takes. They will also be on YouTube. And, if you follow Nick, we're both going to, we're going to collaborate together and both release on Thursdays under our own umbrella of Eyes Wide Open and Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. So isn't that exciting? We've been working hard. We've been very busy, so it's hard to work hard on stuff when you're working hard on other stuff too. So I'm very excited. Nick's very excited, and we're just so glad that's finally ready and finally going to be released. So there you go, January 4th, Mental Health Headline Hot Takes with Nick and Todd. But anyway, back to this episode. So without further ado, I give you Lisa Boehm. Tell me a little bit about your life experience and how that got you into what you're doing.
How that got to be? Well, when you lose a child and the resources out there are crap, you start thinking, what can I do to bring to this space to offer other grieving mothers some support? Is essentially, in a nutshell, how it came to be. We lost Katie almost 8 years ago. And since then, there's more books, there's more podcasts, there's more everything. But at the time, everywhere I turned, the message was the same. It was, your marriage is going to end. If you have other children, they're going to be facing a lifetime of mental illness. Oh, and they'll probably be drug addicts. It was negative, negative, negative. No hope, and not even not even any helpful strategies or anything else like that. Tons of Facebook groups. Yes, they are out there, but holy cow, talk about the black hole. And I have always felt from the beginning that I just wanted to make my daughter proud. I wanted her to be the one up there elbowing the other angels up there and saying, see that lady down there? That's my mama.
So what happened with Katie? What was that situation? How old was she, and like what?
Yeah.
If you don't mind me asking.
No, I'm an open book. Katie was in grade 12 at Campbell Collegiate, and it was December, and she had been working in our home office. It was a normal night. In fact, we had a very colorful conversation about Trump at the dinner table, and she was in the office doing an English assignment.
Trumpers.
Oh, no.
Oh, I'm kidding. I didn't think so.
Not at all. In fact, she was busy texting her friend, or her boyfriend rather, at the supper table saying, we got to talk about Trump. It was all the lead up to the election stuff. And Katie did not align with his thoughts at all. She was... Yes. Anyway,
I don't want to make it political because
no.
That's a whole other
fine.
podcast.
Anyway, she had been working on an assignment in our office and just said, "Oh, at 7:00." She's like, "Oh, I got to run a quick errand. I'll be back." And out the door she went at 7:00. And at 10:00, we got the knock on the door that every parent fears. She had been going southbound on the Ring Road, so just past Sask Polytech, where it was once a very dark curve, and heading kind of around the corner towards Albert Street. And the police that came to our house that night said that it just looked like she had missed the curve, and her car crossed the ditch and hit a semi.
God. Well, I mean, I'm extremely sorry that happened. I can't. You know, I don't know. Did you ever have depression or anxiety issues prior to? Okay.
Yes, my mental health goes back 23 years.
Okay. It's weird. It's like sometimes it's almost like when I was in those states of mind, it was like I would think of the most awful things that could happen to my family, and almost like this dark. I like fantasy is not the right word, but it was like I purposely made myself feel as shitty as I could, but I could never imagine that actually being a true story. You know what I mean? So, yeah, that's horrible. And so what was the next month like?
I couldn't even tell you, Todd. You become so numb and just so disconnected. I remember even talking to people, months, even years down the road, and telling them, a little tidbit of Katie's funeral service. And they very kindly said, I was there. No recollection. As much as people talk about baby brain and, these periods of your life when your brain just is not working well. Mm-hmm. I think grief brain is a real thing. But what I do remember is just thinking, how did this happen to my kid? She had just received an entrance scholarship into the Faculty of Nursing 6 days prior for a 95 average. She was the kid that I didn't even know how to log into Power School or whatever they call it now to check your kids' attendance and their marks. I didn't have to. She'd come home and say, I aced the economics test, got 98. You had a test. Okay, great. She had the best boyfriend in the world. She was dating the son of a doctor that I worked with, who was honestly the best boyfriend that, anybody, a mother could want for her daughter. And she was always health focused. She had been a dancer, a competitive dancer, a good chunk of her life. So healthy eating, exercising, all of this was just part of her daily routine. And she just had a good chip on her shoulder. She was really clear that drugs were not okay. It wasn't something she wanted to partake in. And she hadn't really gotten into partying. So you go through all these questions like, how does this even make sense?
What kind of work were you doing at that time? You were a nurse?
Well, I've worked at the cancer clinic for 32 years as a radiation therapist, which is just a fancy title that I'm somebody that is trained to give radiation treatments to cancer patients.
Gotcha.
And had been doing that for a long time, had been doing that part-time. And as well, I had been working as a health coach. And I was lucky, very lucky in the sense, because I had worked so long at the hospital up to that point and have been really fortunate in the sense that I don't get sick a lot. I had a ton of sick time in my bank. So I took 10 months off, 10 months. And really at the beginning, my focus was holding my little family together. It's amazing how 3 people who are a part of the same family, love each other a lot, can grieve so differently. I was the person that needed to talk and to plan things and, have events, in Katie's memory, fundraisers, and do all these things. And my husband, bless his heart, he was 180 degrees opposite of me. He was pull into himself, just do the minimum. He would go downstairs and watch sports. If I was talking too much or, getting excited about something I wanted to do, I would literally get the hand. We were very, very disconnected for a long time. And then you get a 15-year-old boy mixed in there who has no coping skills, who has no real life experience when it comes to this kind of stuff, and is looking to his parents for some kind of leadership. I don't know if that's the right word even to use in this situation. We're a hot mess. We're speaking, but we're not aligned. And the last place he wants to be is at home because it's pretty heavy to be at home. So he's hanging out with his friends and they're offering him their best coping mechanisms, which as a 15-year-old, sometimes are not the best coping. So we were just a disaster zone. When I look back to that time, I think, how did we make it through? How did we make it through? But when I started taking those 10 months off, my thinking was, okay, I got to hold this little family together. I got to make sure that we stay together and I'll do what I have to do. And in the beginning, that's what it was. I drove my son to school. I picked him up. I made his lunch. I made sure he was up in the morning, which you do what you got to do, right? My husband, I was trying to take as much load off of his plate as I could by, I ran the house. Like there were always groceries that, everything was done. And then I crashed big time at about the 6 or 7 month mark. And it's something that I'm struggling with to tell people, but I think it's a part of my story. And I think it's important to share, especially for those who are grieving. Suicidal ideation became a battle that I fought every day. My husband and I have always enjoyed red wine. We like, happy hour on Friday nights and charcuterie boards. And, it wasn't a big part of our lives, but we really enjoyed a glass of wine. So when we traveled, we'd always bring wine home. So we had a pretty substantial wine rack. And as somebody, as you can imagine, after you lose a child, I had a collection of sleeping pills that were, a new box has, 30 to 60 pills in it. And I remember counting those pills out, and I remember counting the bottles of wine and just not actively prepared at that minute to do something, but making a plan. But in my irrational brain, maybe it was rational, I don't know, I kept getting stuck at this one point of thinking, do you take the pills first to make sure that they get in there? Or do you drink all the wine first? And just getting stuck there. And thank God thank God I didn't have the answer to that question, because that I would just think, get stuck. And then I would kind of shelf that for a while. And honestly, I would have those thoughts for a long time. I don't even know what the time period was. But then my son was really struggling. And I remember just looking at him at the dinner table one day and thinking, Jesus, Lisa, if you take your own life, how is your son, or your husband for that matter, ever going to get their feet underneath them again? You absolutely cannot do that to them. But it was definitely a struggle.
I actually just talked to someone, I don't know, a month back or something, and her son took his own life, and it was 2 years later her husband took his own life, and it was the same thing. It was just struggle, and so I'm assuming those thoughts are somewhat normal when grieving, especially if you've, like you said, you've had mental health issues in the prior to this anyway. So throw something like grief on top of it. I'm assuming it's a normal thing.
Well, and I mean,
Question?
I'm not a professional. I haven't read the fine print in the textbooks or anything like that. But just speaking to hundreds and hundreds of grieving mothers, I have literally asked in a Zoom meeting where we've got tons of people, who has had thoughts like this? And a lot of the hands will go up. A lot of the hands.
Yeah. So
because you're in such deep,
you don't have the stats,
pain.
but through your own experience with this, it seems like it's not an uncommon thing anyway.
For sure.
Yeah. So you do, so it's not just one-on-one, you'll do a whole group kind of counseling.
Do. And I don't call myself a counselor. I call myself a mentor. I'm actually a certified grief educator. And then I have, we joke. It's very inappropriate what grieving people will say, but I say we have a PhD in grief.
Right.
We have a PhD in grief. And while I think that there is definitely a space for professional counselors, therapists, and all of that, I think that peer support and talking to someone who is living what you're going through can really be empowering. And I prefer to actually work in groups because I think I'm not the knower of all things, but oftentimes when people get together and they share their experiences together, then you have other people who are bringing great things to the table as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Peer support is amazing. Just as a student of AA, it's amazing because, you get a little bit of everything, and you can take a little small bit from everybody's story, and vice versa. They're taking stuff from everyone else's too. So yeah, it's just this nice big room of wisdom and empathy. So yeah, 100% agree. Peer support, not taken away from one-on-one counseling, because that's another strategy that people need on top of peer support.
Yes, in addition, for sure.
Yeah. So how did you go from that jump from counting pills and wine to becoming a mentor?
Wow. I think it was really an evolution. I think if you put it in those terms, you think, I don't know, how did I do that? But when you break it into the small steps, I remember shortly after that, I am somebody that always needs to have a project. And this goes way back. But so I had taken all this time off work, and I had a lot of time on my hands, and I knew I needed to work on myself and do all these other things, but I needed a project. And I remember saying to my husband one day, I'm going to write a book. He says, you're going to what? I said, I'm going to write a book. And then he just looked at me blankly. He said, well, what are you going to write about? I said, our experience. And he just stopped there. If you would have asked me 10 years ago if I would ever write a book, I'd laugh at you. I'd say it would be more likely that I would scale Everest. But here I was writing a book. And again, I wanted it to bring stories, not just my story, but other grieving mothers' stories into the book. And I wanted it to be hopeful. I wanted somebody to read this and go, okay, maybe I can do this too. So I wrote the book. And then after that, people were commenting on it, and it was like, well, do you have anything else? Do you have anything else, with this kind of messaging that you can offer? I created courses, but grief is lifelong, right? You don't take a 6-week course and then I'm done, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's when I created this membership type of group mentoring. And so that's how it got to be there.
And I suppose like you said kind of earlier, like anything you were reading was very negative, and that's why you decided to take that positive spin on, well, not positive spin, but the positive side of grieving.
Just giving people hope really was the underlying thing.
So I know lots of people have, well, I suppose it's even worse for parents. Maybe not. I don't know. See, I'm just going to warn you. I'm been very blessed when it comes to grief. I haven't had to deal with a lot of grief, to be honest with you. It somewhat fascinates me and terrifies me because I know how I am already. And it's like, oh God, what's going to happen when something does happen? But I've had a taste of it. So I'm a huge animal lover. I love my dogs. They are members of my family. And a couple of years ago, we had to put a dog down, and I do fear for when that moment happens. I've had conversations in preparation for it. Actually, that's how concerned I am about it. Because we don't talk about death very often in our culture anyway. I think other cultures, other countries, it's like there's festivals and all types of things that they do. But it's very taboo for some reason around. Maybe not taboo, but it's just people don't want to talk about it for whatever reason. But so I've actually been preparing for when this comes. And I think I've got some good advice. I've been told that grief can also be very beautiful at points. And I had I would call him a mentor for a while in my life, that he said it's, grief is also a choice. Not grief, but how you grieve is a choice. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that. I would
absolutely agree. I think just about everything that happens in life happens out of our control, but the only thing we control is how we react. I prefer, as much as possible, to grieve with love, if that makes sense. I could look at the fact that I only had Katie for 17 and a half years and be really ripped about it and really broken and really fixated on that point, that I never got to be the mother of the bride. I never got to celebrate her graduation. There's a million things that she never got to do and I never got to do with her. I could fixate on that. Or I can focus on the fact that I had her for 17 and a half years. As I said, I've worked in oncology forever. I know plenty of families that did not get 17 and a half healthy years with their kids. We had the ability to go on a lot of trips together. We created a lot of memories together. As I mentioned, she was as healthy as a horse. We got to do so much in those 17 and a half years. And I am blessed and grateful for every second that we had together. And I also choose to grieve in a way. Some people might get tired of me talking about Katie, but that's part of me keeping her memory alive. I love to share ridiculous things that she used to do and create projects around her. I used to collect, prior to COVID, used bridesmaids' dresses or grad gowns and donate them to schools, because it became evident to me after she passed away that not every family can afford all the fancy stuff at grad time. Doing little things like that in her memory. That's the way I choose to do my grief.
But it wasn't always like that. Like when you first started grieving, did you have that mindset already?
I had that mindset, but I didn't. I think we all need to go through acute grief. You can't take grief and say, I'm just going to put you over there because I'm going to do this other thing. I think we do have to go through that gross, yucky part of the process. We do.
Yeah. Today's episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health is brought to you by Co-op. I've been a member of my local co-op, Sherwood Co-op, for, about 25 years, I think. My co-op is one of more than 150 local independent cooperative associations in more than 600 communities across Western Canada. Co-op is a different kind of business. It's not just a gas bar or a grocery store, although co-op is those things too. At its core, co-op is a group of people working together to help their neighbors and build their community. Co-op members are owners, and success is shared with everyone. Your co-op doesn't benefit one person or one corporation. Your co-op was built for everyone. Your co-op was built for your community. Learn more about co-op and find a location near you at coop.crs. One thing I've learned through my experience with mental health and addictions is you never know what you need to hear until you hear it. Make sure to rate and review on Apple and to tell as many people as you can about the podcast so others can hear something they need to hear from one of my guests. After all, this is a free mental health service, which is a rare thing, so why not share with as many people as you can? You mentioned you took time off and you felt like you were taking care of your little family, but did that kind of prolong your grief? Because it's like, I don't have time to do that because I'm taking care of my son and my husband. And that's kind of what caused the crash was like, I haven't taken enough time for me to actually process everything.
I don't actually know, but I know that I created some very helpful rituals right off the hop. Katie died early December, and just the timing of it all, we made our son go back to school a week after. And while that might sound a little bit cruel, the reason we did is because that was going to be the last week of school before the Christmas break. And we knew that if he prolonged going back to school until January, it would be even harder. So we said, you know what, go back some half days, go back a class here and a class there, but ease into it, just do it that way. So my husband would take him to school, drop him off. My husband would go into work for a couple of hours. I don't know how he did it. Pick our son up and then come home. And during that time, when they were pulling out of the driveway, I would literally get a cup of coffee and have coffee with Katie. We brought her ashes home. And in the beginning, her ashes sat in the great big picture window in our front room. And there was her picture, her urn, and, a few little tokens. And I would literally pull up the chair right in front of her picture and right in front of her urn. And I had a little ritual where I would have coffee with her. And I have not been a very religious person in my life. But I would say the Lord's Prayer because I didn't know how to pray. I didn't. And then I would talk to Katie. And some days were an hour or more, and I would pour my heart out, what I wanted to say, what I never got to say, what I regret, all the things. And usually it was, the big snotty cry. And when I think about it now, I think, man, that was really good therapy, actually. And then I would usually end it just by choosing one thing to be grateful for. So that was a ritual. But the crash, I don't know that it was because I wasn't taking care of myself. I just think that the yearning and the longing and the missing was so intense at that time.
I don't want to have grief, Lisa.
It sucks. I'm not going to lie.
How often do you have to deal with people, especially, mothers, I suppose, because that's who you normally talk to, that are just struggling with guilt? Oh. Because I'm assuming that's what I'm going to feel. Even if it's someone I don't even know that dies, it's like I feel guilt. It's like, I should have said hi to them more often or something. It's like, oh God, I can imagine if it's a child.
Well, I would say, and I literally have asked my group numerous times, what's your biggest struggle? Because then that helps me create content and what we're going to talk about and all kinds of things. Hands down, 100% guilt. And when you think about it as a parent, it doesn't matter if you're a mom or a dad. When it boils right down to it, you think, I've got one job. I've got one job to keep my kid alive, to keep them safe. And Katie's accident was just that. It was an accident. I can't blame it on drugs. I can't blame it on someone taking her life. I can't blame anyone. In fact, the accident was Katie's, technically.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember sitting in a counselor's office, and this was 3 years out already, Todd. And the tears were just coming down my face. And she said, I can't remember what she asked me. And I said, I failed Katie. I failed her. I failed to keep her safe, even though my head, my logical brain was saying, you couldn't have done anything. But you feel that guilt. And then there are situations where kids have been doing drugs and maybe mom and dad didn't know. They feel guilty. How come I didn't know? Or in those situations where kids have taken their lives, how come I didn't know? How come I didn't stop it? How come I didn't come home at that time? You know, what if?
Mm-hmm.
That is a huge struggle. And I do have...
Is that a choice?
What's that feeling guilty?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like I said before, it's perception. It's a reaction. And so I have something that I work through with grieving moms, and it's very short, but it's essentially a questionnaire, and it's just a lot of self-reflection, you know, and, you know, do you have a crystal ball in your back pocket? I don't. Do you know the winning lottery tickets on Friday? I don't. Do you know what your spouse, your partner, your kid, your dog is thinking right now? No. You know, did you do these things for your kids? Did you provide a loving home? Did you, you know, all these things so that they can start looking at things in a more realistic lens. I am a good mom. I did everything for my child. I did not purposefully put my child in a dangerous situation that I knew would lead to their death.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a tough reality. It takes us about an hour to work through, but you can just see the shoulders drop and almost the light bulbs go off over people's head, just because what I try to do is help them think about things from a different angle.
Yeah. I even if the light bulb doesn't come on, it may flicker, and I'm sure that's the start. You know, it's like,
right.
Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Have you noticed, maybe even you went through this, the parents that do lose a child and have another child, they then become overprotective of that child?
I think there's two different ways that people parent, and I've seen both, and I've probably been both. I've seen overprotective. That was me. I don't know even if I'd go so far as to say I have PTSD, but when I hear a siren, Todd, it just about turns me inside out. I've done a lot of work around that. I've done EMDR. I'm better. But my poor son, man, I would hear a siren and I'd instantly have to know where he was and that he was safe. Same with my husband. And that went on for years. And I think they both understood. But I've also seen parents who, man, life is short. Like, just go for it. Oh, yeah, don't worry about the rules. Just, go have fun. Do the things. Live your life. And I think both can be dangerous and damaging. I do think that kids need healthy boundaries. Call them rules, call them whatever you want. I think that does show love and concern as well. But there's a balance. We can't duct tape our kids to the basement wall for 10 years and hope that they'll be safe. My son just got his driver's license after Katie died. He likes to drive fast. He has a sports car that goes really fast and that was meant to be driven fast. He is a boy. He has,
sure wasn't just meant to get girls?
Well,
little
maybe.
both.
Maybe a little. But, you say a prayer every time they leave the door, and you think, I got to let him live his life, and I don't want him to develop paranoias and fears and mental health because of my hangups.
Right.
So oh boy, it's a struggle. It is not easier. No.
Yeah. Parenting is just, man, it is a mind F.
100%.
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, since our son's left and stuff, and I've caught myself being overprotective with their mental health because that's something I dealt with, and it's like, it's a challenge. So then you feel guilty either way. It's like, I'm not doing enough. Oh, I'm doing too much. Either way, it's like, I'm like, what do I do? How do I do this? What do I do? Right. And then, then I get a clear mind for a second. It's like, you know what? I'm alive. I figured stuff out. I can't help him through every situation. He's his own person. There's going to be stuff where he's just going to have to like learn on his own. And that's just the way it is. And, and I turned out okay-ish.
There you go.
so yeah, but at the same time, you're there to support. It's funny you said balance a few times, and that was something that my mentor used to say all the time to me. He's like, it was like his answer for everything. It was like I'd come in and ask him something. He's like, "What did I tell you last time?" It's like, "Oh, right." Like, what's the healthy balance here? Yeah. So, I love that word. So what's the name of your book? Is it an anthology of other people's stories too? You said?
I wouldn't call it an anthology, but it's got little snippets of other people's stories. It's called Journey to Healing, A Mother's Guide to Navigating Child Loss. So I interviewed 31 other moms and got their perspectives on their journeys, and mothers of kids of all ages, old, young, mothers who lost their kids from all kinds of reasons.
Right. And I suppose that makes a difference in how people grieve too, is how a child is lost. Or is that not?
I would say addictions and suicide have a whole other layer. I really do think that those losses are even more complicated.
Yeah, and there's record-breaking numbers right now of both of those. So
yes.
So you've started a podcast besides the book, besides the mentoring, and so maybe tell me a little bit about the podcast.
Well, I had this idea, as I said earlier. I love stories. I love listening to people's stories. I think there's power in stories. So I've had this idea for a while that I really wanted to do something around people's stories, but not just stories of adversity. And ever since we lost Katie, I'm always looking for stories that inspire me with hope. So I've been kind of mulling over this for a while. And then when mental health really showed up in my house, my family, my extended family, and I was staring mental health in the face again in the mirror, it just became clear to me that that's the direction that my podcast would go, is mental health and resilience. And it's really that resilience and that piece of hope that I'm really excited to share. And, we've had some really exciting people on the show already. And just interesting, it's just been people that I've met who've shared their stories. Jacques Delorme has been on there. If you haven't had him on your podcast, I highly suggest that you do. He shares his story of just a horrific accident and how he's worked through that and the work that he does now, which is very inspiring. Ty Strawford has been on there. And for a 21-year-old guy who's faced some pretty dark times, he is very insightful. In fact, I had a full-blown Oprah aha moment when I was interviewing him. And just the other day, I was interviewing Chris Beaudry from the Broncos coaching team, or coaching staff rather. And just, I get so much out of talking to these people. And then I've been doing some solo episodes in between as well. So it's it's just been another platform, I think, for people to offer them some hope when things are a little bit dark.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I consider my podcast a mental health service. So it's like you're providing another service of, well, probably both. I think people get a lot telling their story, and people get a lot from hearing their story. So,
For sure.
So yeah, it's there can never be enough podcasts and enough services available for people, especially in this province at this time of our being here on Earth, because it is lacking. Like, so there's been record of overdoses and deaths and or suicides. I think, actually, don't quote me on that about the record number of suicides, but definitely record number of overdoses. But a lot of those overdoses are not accidental.
Yeah,
I'm trying to get it. So yeah, that's amazing that there's one more service out there.
Well, and I think everybody does things differently. Like, I think, your guests and the way you do things is going to be different from mine. And, I think that, like you say, just if we can offer more things to more people, I think that more is better.
Mm-hmm. It's like if there was only one counselor, that's why you try out a whole bunch of different counselors until there's a right fit that is right for you. So yeah, exactly. More the merrier. And then you've got a speaking gig coming up in January. Do you want to talk about that event at all?
Actually, I have two. I will be speaking at the Regina Women's Network on April 9th, and we'll be talking about resilience. And that's actually a lunch and learn kind of a situation. It's going to be at the Flats. If anybody's interested in joining us, they can connect with me. And I'm just so excited to be speaking at the More Joy event, which is January 24th, rather. And Ty Smith from the Broncos will be the keynote speaker. And we actually just met online on a Zoom call with Crystal Lee Froese just earlier this week. And I think it's going to be a fantastic event. Obviously, his story involves grief, massive grief. And I just feel like his approach to grief and his approach to mental health and everything is very aligned with the way that I am choosing to do my grief. So I think that it's going to be a very powerful event.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you that don't know, Ty Smith, he was in the bus accident here where 16 people were taken. And he also was a recent winner of Canada's Amazing Race.
Amazing Race Canada. Yeah.
Amazing Race Canada. Oh, yeah. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a great event. I spoke at it last year, and I don't know if I did it. I don't know if I did a good job or not, but I did it, and it's just a great event. So, yeah, go even if you're not in Regina, go to Regina so you can go to the event.
Yes. And I would say that, it's just like any kind of event. Every time it gets put on, that Crystal Lee, it gets better and better every year. So I think that, and I think the ticket prices are quite reasonable. I want to say $55. Don't quote me on that, but it's
$55 at the door, $45 right now online.
Look at you. You got all the details. Yes. Fantastic. So it's just a really uplifting evening if anybody's interested.
Yeah. And super cash. I've been to a couple kind of big gala mental health things lately, and it's, I'm just not comfortable there. You know what I mean? I like the more casual ones. So, I mean, have as many events as you can throughout the spectrum of casual to non. But yeah, this one's very, very laid back. So yeah.
And don't forget the therapy dogs. There's therapy dogs on hand too. So if you're an animal lover, you'll absolutely love that.
Yes, we'll traumatize the dogs with our traumas,
with all our stuff.
Those poor dogs. So this is called That's Somebody Special, and it's a Some Bunny special. Get it? It's a segment where we chat about who cooperated in your mental health journey and helped fill your emotional tank. Brought to you by Co-op. So, who would you say was you want to give a shout out to that was really, there for you?
I met two incredible women very early on in my grief journey. And you wouldn't think that that's where you would get hope from. But I went to an event 2 weeks after I lost Katie. And these two women, they were 4 and 5 years out from me, but their names are Jill Lee and Allison. Jill and Allison. I met Jill and Allison, and they were such an inspiration. And just through observation, I learned that A, I can do my grief any way I want, and B, that I can live in a way that makes my daughter proud. So big shout out to those two ladies.
When you say they were 3 or 4 years out, you mean like they had lost somebody 3 or 4 years prior to you?
They were further down the grief path than I was, but because they were further down the path, I could see that maybe that's how I could look with my grief in the future.
Thank you so much, Lisa. She's been a wonderful supporter of mine. And we met about a year ago, and she's doing wonderful things. And yeah, she's just a super lady, Hey, by the way, there's going to be a new contest coming up to win yourself some Co-op gift cards. It's super easy. You should be doing this anyway. Anyone that leaves a review and a rating for the podcast on Apple Podcast, you just screenshot that rating and review that you've sent, email that screenshot to bunnyhugspodcast@gmail.com, and you'll be entered to win a $25 gift card from Co-op. And this will be an ongoing thing till the end of January. On the final episode of January, I will draw 4 names. So that's 4 chances to win $25 from Co-op just by rating and reviewing, screenshotting and emailing that screenshot to bunnyhugspodcast@gmail.com. So good luck, and go do that right now so you don't forget. Also, don't forget that Thursday, January 4th, new episodes of Mental Health Headline Hot Takes with Nick and Todd are coming out. That's hard to say. I've had to re-record saying that many times now. So watch out for that. If you like these interviews, don't forget to also go to YouTube if you want to watch them. If you're a visual type person, that's at Bunny Hugs and Mental Health on YouTube. Thank you so much, Co-op, for the sponsorship of this episode. And also, please don't forget to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.